November 12, 1942, the Solomon Islands. The air temperature is 95 degrees, but the humidity sits at a suffocating 100%. You are a 20-year-old Marine private, lying face down in the mud, your heart hammering against your ribs like a captured bird. The air above you is snapping, the supersonic crack of Japanese Arisaka rounds cutting through the foliage. Your squad is pinned down. The only thing keeping the enemy from overrunning your position is the rhythmic thud-thud-thud of the .30 caliber Browning machine gun to your left. It is the heartbeat of your defense. It is the sound of survival, and then silence. The gunner screams out the one word that turns a soldier's blood to ice. Ammo! This shouldn't be a problem. The United States of America is the arsenal of democracy. Back home, factories in Detroit and Pittsburgh are churning out munitions at a rate the world has never seen. We have Liberty ships bridging the ocean, trains running 24 hours a day, and a logistical chain that is the envy of every empire in history. The system works. The supply runner slides into your foxhole, dragging a fresh wooden crate of .30 Aero-6 ammunition. Salvation has arrived. It is right there, sitting in the mud between you. But this is where the might of the American industrial machine crashes headfirst into a wall of stupidity. To get the bullets, you have to open the crate. Inside the wood is a waterproof liner. To keep the powder dry during the long voyage across the Pacific, the Ordnance Department, in their infinite wisdom, decided to seal these boxes with paper tape. To ensure it was waterproof, they dipped the tab in wax. In a sterile laboratory in Washington, D.C., this worked perfectly. You pull the tab, the tape zips off, and the box opens. But this isn't a lab. This is a jungle. The wax has hardened in the heat, fusing the tab to the box. Or maybe the cold of a European winter has made the paper brittle. It doesn't matter why. The gunner grabs the tab. His hands are slick with sweat, mud, and maybe blood. He pulls. The tab rips off in his hand. The box is still sealed. The enemy is advancing. The machine gun is cold. Now, instead of reloading and suppressing the enemy, you and the gunner are forced to engage in a frantic, terrifying wrestling match with a cardboard box. You're clawing at the wax with your fingernails. You're hacking at the seal with a combat knife, praying the blade doesn't slip and spark a primer. Every second you spend fighting that packaging is a second the enemy is moving freely. Every second you struggle with that tape is a second your squad is exposed. In 1942, American soldiers were dying not because they lacked courage, and not because they lacked bullets. They were dying because they couldn't get the wrapper off the package. It is a statistical absurdity. You can build the tanks, you can draft the men, and you can calculate the ballistics, but war is decided in the chaotic margins of reality. And in the chaotic margins of World War II, the United States Army was being hamstrung by a defective wax seal. The generals looked at the casualty reports and saw tactical failures. They saw ground lost. But thousands of miles away, in a factory in Illinois, one woman looked at that box and saw the truth. She realized that the greatest military force on Earth had a fatal flaw, and it was smaller than a fingernail. Her name was Vesta Stoudt. She wasn't a chemical engineer. She wasn't a four-star general. She wasn't a logistics expert with a PhD from MIT. She was a 50-year-old grandmother working the line at the Green River Ordnance Plant in Illinois. While the experts in Washington saw numbers on a spreadsheet, Vesta saw faces. She had 2 sons serving in the Navy. Every time a crate of rifle grenades or ammunition rolled past her station, she didn't see a unit of production. She saw a lifeline. She saw the specific, tangible object that might be the only thing standing between her boys and a Japanese bayonet. And because she was looking at these boxes with the eyes of a mother, rather than a bureaucrat, she noticed what everyone else had missed. Her job was to inspect and pack the boxes. She watched the standard procedure: seal the box with paper tape, dip the pull tab in wax to waterproof it, and send it off. It was a clumsy, fragile system. Vesta realized that if the wax hardened too much in the cold or melted in the heat, the tab would snap off. She visualized her sons on a beachhead, under fire, frantically clawing at a smooth, wax-sealed box with bloody fingernails while the enemy closed in. The thought kept her awake at night. She knew there had to be a better way. She didn't just complain about it. She engineered a solution in her head. The problem with the old seal was structural rigidity. Wax is brittle. It doesn't flex. War is chaotic and kinetic. Equipment needs to move, bend, and absorb impact. Vesta's idea was a radical departure from the standard hard seal philosophy. She proposed a new kind of tape, a composite material that solved 3 engineering problems simultaneously. Think of it as an industrial sandwich. Layer 1. The anchor. A heavy rubber-based adhesive. Unlike the gum-based tapes of the time that needed water to activate, like a stamp, this was pressure-sensitive. You slap it on, and it stays. It creates an instant, airtight bond that doesn't require heat or solvents. Layer 2. The skeleton. This was the genius stroke. Between the glue and the backing, you sandwich a mesh of cotton duck fabric. This provides immense tensile strength along the length of the tape. You can use it to strap a heavy box shut, and it won't stretch or snap under the load. It holds the weight. Layer 3. The shield. A top coating of polyethylene. This makes the tape waterproof, shedding rain and mud, like water off a duck's back. But here is the critical feature B that the old wax seal lacked: anisotropic strength. Because of the grid pattern of the cotton mesh, the tape is incredibly strong if you pull it lengthwise. You could tow a Jeep with enough of it. But if you apply force perpendicular to the weave, it has 0 resistance. This meant a soldier didn't need a knife. He didn't need a pull tab. He didn't need scissors. He could grab the loose end, rip it with his bare hands, and the tape would tear cleanly across the strip. It was a seal that was stronger than steel when it needed to be, and weaker than paper when you wanted it open. It was the perfect tactical solution. Vesta took her idea to the factory supervisors. She explained the flaw in the wax. She explained the mechanics of the cloth tape. She explained that this would save seconds, and those seconds would save lives. The response? A collective shrug. The supervisors at the Green River Ordnance Plant told her to get back to work. They told her that the Ordnance Department had designed the wax seals, and the Ordnance Department didn't make mistakes. They told her she was just a packer, and she should leave the engineering to the engineers. They underestimated Vesta Stoudt. They thought she was just an employee who would follow orders. They forgot she was a mother whose children were in the line of fire. February 10th, 1943. Most people, when told no by their boss, simply go back to work. They grumble, they complain to their spouse, and they let it go. But Vesta Stoudt wasn't working for a paycheck. She was working for the survival of her children. So she did something that, by all accounts, should have been impossible. She went over her supervisor's head. She went over the plant manager's head. She went over the general of the army's head. She sat down at her kitchen table, pulled out a pen and paper, and wrote a letter to the President of the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. It wasn't a plea for money. It wasn't a political rant. It was a technical specification document written by a worried mother. She sketched out the diagrams. She explained the flaw in the wax, and she wrote a sentence that likely hit FDR harder than any briefing from his Joint Chiefs. I have 2 sons out there, and we can't let them down by giving them boxes that take too long to open. In the bureaucracy of Washington, a letter like this usually ends up in the incinerator. But history pivoted on a dime that day. The letter landed on the desk of the War Production Board. They didn't laugh. They didn't dismiss it. They read it, tested the theory, and realized with horror that the lady from the ammunition plant was absolutely right. Within weeks, the order came down from the highest levels of government. Make this happen. Now. The War Production Board turned to Johnson & Johnson. They were already experts in medical adhesive tapes. They took Vesta's concept, the waterproof polyethylene, the cotton mesh, the aggressive rubber adhesive, and they went to work. They called it duck tape, partly because it was made from cotton duck fabric, and partly because it shed water just like the bird. They colored it olive drab, rolled it up, and shipped it out by the millions. When the first crates arrived at the front lines, the vindication was instant. A soldier grabbed the end of the tape. He didn't need to heat it. He didn't need to chip away ice. He just pulled. Rip. The box was open. The ammo was ready. The problem was solved. But then something remarkable happened. The soldiers looked at this miracle material, this sticky, waterproof, indestructible ribbon, and they realized it was good for a hell of a lot more than just opening boxes. This is the moment the innovation truly scaled. The tape ceased to be a packaging material and became a tool of war. German engineering was famous for its precision. They built Tiger tanks like Swiss watches, complex, over-engineered beasts that broke down if you looked at them wrong. To fix a German tank, you needed a specialized mechanic and a shop full of tools. To fix an American Jeep, you needed a roll of Vesta's tape. Soldiers began using it for everything. A cracked windshield? Tape it. A hole in the tent? Tape it. Boots falling apart in the mud? Tape them back together. Loose wiring on a radio set? Tape it. Medics in the heat of battle, running out of sutures or proper bandages, slapped pieces of the airtight tape over sucking chest wounds, saving lives by sealing the lungs until the patient could get to surgery. Vesta Stoudt had tried to invent a better box opener. Instead, she had accidentally invented the universal fix-it tool for the entire Allied war machine. While the Axis powers were struggling to maintain their complex supply lines, American GIs were literally taping their equipment back together and keeping the momentum moving forward. The bosses at the Green River Ordnance Plant had told Vesta to stop complaining. But out in the mud of Europe and the sands of the Pacific, thousands of men were coming home because she refused to listen. The humble roll of tape had become as essential as the rifle itself. When the War Production Board handed Vesta's letter to Johnson & Johnson, the instruction was clear. We don't need a debate. We need a solution. The engineers at J&J didn't just replicate Vesta's idea, they weaponized it. They understood that in a total war, the supply chain is just as lethal as the artillery. If the supply chain breaks, the artillery stops firing. So, they developed a composite material that was, frankly, over-engineered for a cardboard box. It was a sandwich of industrial necessity. On the bottom, they applied a thick, aggressive layer of rubber-based adhesive. Unlike the polite, gum-based tapes of the civilian world that needed water to activate, this stuff was pressure-sensitive. It didn't care if the surface was hot, cold, or dirty. It just stuck. In the middle, they embedded the muscle, a mesh of cotton duck fabric. This gave the tape immense tensile strength. You could strap a crate to the side of a tank with it, and it wouldn't snap. And on top, they coated it with a new, space-age plastic called polyethylene. It was flexible, and more importantly, it was hydrophobic. Water beat it up and rolled off it like off a duck's back. The soldiers called it duct tape. But the real genius, the physics that saved lives, was in the weave. Vesta had identified the need for speed, and the cotton mesh provided it. The tape had what engineers call anisotropic strength. It was incredibly strong if you pulled it lengthwise, but if you grabbed the edge and pulled sideways, the weave created a perfect fault line. No knife, no scissors, no teeth, just grip, rip, and stick. Late 1943, the Italian campaign. The weather is a nightmare. It is a slurry of freezing rain and mud that swallows Boots whole. A forward operating base is under heavy mortar fire. The call goes out for more 60mm rounds. A supply sergeant slides into a waterlogged trench, dragging a fresh crate of ammunition. In 1942, this was the moment of panic. The wax seals would be frozen solid. The paper tabs would shatter. Men would be cursing and hacking at the box with bayonets while the enemy adjusted their aim. But this crate is different. It has a stripe of olive drab ribbon running around the edge. The sergeant doesn't fumble. He doesn't look for a tool. He grabs the loose end of the tape with a gloved hand. He yanks. Rip. The sound is sharp and satisfying, cutting through the noise of the rain. The tape comes off in one clean, continuous strip. The lid pops open. The rounds are passed up the line. The mortars fire back. The entire interaction took 4 seconds. In the grand calculus of the war, 4 seconds doesn't seem like much. But multiply those 4 seconds by millions of crates across thousands of battles, from the beaches of Normandy to the islands of the Pacific. Vesta Stoudt hadn't just saved time. She had accelerated the heartbeat of the American war machine. This roll of tape became the perfect symbol of the difference between the Axis and the Allies. Nazi Germany was obsessed with complex perfection. They built tanks like the Tiger and the Panther, machines of terrifying precision, with interlocking road wheels and high-tolerance transmissions. But when they broke down in the mud of Russia, they stayed broken, because you needed a team of engineers to fix them. The Americans? We built things that were ugly, simple, and worked. And when they didn't work, we had the tape. As the duct tape flooded the front lines, the soldiers realized Vesta had given them something far more valuable than a box opener. She had given them a universal repair kit. The vindication was absolute. The generals in Washington had dismissed Vesta because she wasn't an expert. But the privates and corporals in the field treated her invention like gold dust. They realized that this sticky, waterproof fabric didn't just hold boxes together. It held the war together. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the great machinery of war ground to a halt. The Liberty ships were docked, the bombers were parked in the desert boneyards, and the M1 Garands were greased and crated. The soldiers came home. They traded their combat boots for work boots and their rifles for hammers. But there was one piece of equipment they refused to leave behind. They had spent years in the mud and the blood relying on that roll of sticky green fabric. They had learned that when the world was falling apart, Vesta Stout's tape would hold it together. So when the post-war housing boom exploded and the suburbs of America began to rise from the dust, the veterans brought the tape with them. Suddenly, millions of homes were going up at breakneck speed. They all needed modern heating and air conditioning. The construction crews, men who had learned to improvise on the beaches of Normandy, needed a way to seal the metal air ducts quickly and permanently. They reached for the duct tape. It was the perfect industrial solution. It was airtight, it was tough, and it didn't care about dust or heat. The manufacturers saw the shift. They took the olive drab color, designed to hide in the jungle grass, and replaced it with a metallic silver to match the aluminum ductwork. And somewhere in the phonetic drift of the American accent, the name shifted. Duct tape became duct tape. It is a strange twist of irony. The tape was invented to waterproof ammo boxes for the jungle, but it found its eternal fame holding together the ventilation systems of the baby boomer generation. But the legacy goes far beyond the basement furnace. April 1970, Apollo 13. 3 American astronauts are stranded 200,000 miles from Earth. An oxygen tank has exploded. They are freezing to death in a crippled spacecraft, and the carbon dioxide levels are rising to lethal limits. The NASA engineers on the ground have to figure out how to fit a square lithium hydroxide canister into a round hole to scrub the air. They dump a pile of scavenged junk onto a table in Houston and tell the crew to build a filter. And there, in the center of the pile, is a roll of gray tape. Vesta Stout's invention didn't just save soldiers in 1943. It saved astronauts in the vacuum of space. It is the only tool in human history that has fixed a Jeep in a swamp and a spacecraft on the way to the moon. Vesta Stoudt never became a millionaire from her patent. She didn't get a ticker tape parade down Fifth Avenue. But before the war ended, she received a letter from the War Production Board. It didn't contain a check. It contained a simple sentence. Your suggestion is of exceptional merit. It was a quiet validation for a woman who had been told to sit down and be quiet. So, the next time you are in your garage, and you grab that silver roll to patch a leaking hose, or fix a broken taillight, or silence a rattling pipe, take a second to really look at it. You aren't just holding a roll of adhesive. You are holding the physical manifestation of a mother's worry. The engineers saw a box that needed sealing. The generals saw a logistical statistic. But Vesta Stoudt saw her sons in danger. She saw the terrifying reality of a boy with muddy hands struggling to survive, and she refused to accept a world where bad packaging could cost a life. The experts told her it couldn't be done. The supervisors told her to get back to work. She stood up, she wrote a letter, and she stuck the world back together.